Imagine yourself a scenario in which I approach you and say, "Hello, friend. I'm thinking about getting some food. Would you rather get Taco Bell or McDonald's?" You choose McDonald's, and I say, "Okay, sounds good," and we take off. However, once we get to the general area that the fast food restaurants are in, you realize that I've driven past McDonald's. In your confusion, you turn to me as I pull into the Taco Bell parking lot and say to me,
Hold up, friend. Surely you misunderstood. I wanted to go to McDonald's.
and as you wait for my explanation for this strange turn of events, I turn to you with a completely deadpan expression and say, "Yes, I know." And then we get Taco Bell. Whatever feeling I incurred within you with this horrifying tale is a one-for-one recreation of what it's like playing the Dark Pictures anthology Little Hope. The question that circled in your mind, "Why did you even give me a choice?" is a mind-numbing perpetuation of what the Steam store so inaccurately labels as a game. Shall we, dear viewer? Little Hope is a game that advertises itself as a narrative-driven, non-linear choose-your-own-adventure story, much in the same vein as games from Telltale. It's made by the same people who made Until Dawn, and so therefore you're going to be getting a lot of comparisons of it, not just from me, but from basically everyone who knows about it. Let's be incredibly clear here. Until Dawn was not that great of a game. The story had some interesting beats, and they used the Wendigo in a fairly creative way, but it would be far from what I would call a narrative masterpiece. This stemming mostly from the way the choices and outcomes are constructed, and how these choices have very minimal effect on the narrative in the grand scheme of things. I'm sure the story itself has some structural issues to compound onto this, but in order for me to really detail that, I'd have to play it again, and I really don't feel like doing that. The point is, the story still felt rather linear, despite it being advertised not to be. With the exception of a few different lines of dialogue, a differing cutscene, or a character death, the story ultimately led to the same climax of escaping the Wendigo-infested cabin before it exploded. Whether or not you succeeded in doing so, and however many people you got out along the way, being the only differences in said climax. To an extent, this is understandable, I would say. Creating a truly non-linear experience would be nigh impossible to make. We had an entire crappy Netflix special to illustrate that. Until Dawn understood that, if even to a limited extent, which is why the choice mechanic revolved more heavily around whether or not you got characters killed and how much they hated each other by the end. Despite its flaws, Until Dawn played fairly well to its strengths, sometimes, which is why I believe it is as popular as it was back in the day. Then Supermassive Games decided they wanted to do it again, and so they made Man of Medan and Little Hope. Reusing their formula, even down to the hiring of some random actor that you think you recognize but don't necessarily know their name offhand.
Last time it was the dude from Quantum Break with the fat face. This time it's, well, you know that meme? The 4-panel one where the dude at the end says, "You guys are getting paid"? It's that dude.
However, they somehow managed to remove all the parts of this formula that made Until Dawn a fairly bearable experience, and threw together a story that feels like it was whipped together in an afternoon, with people that contain so little defining characteristics that up until the third time I played through the game for this video, I simply knew them by their poorly rendered facial features. But enough intro, let's talk about the disaster that is this game's opening, shall we? We open with an old bus driver emerging from a diner and driving off until he reaches a police stop. There he is informed of an accident up ahead and how traffic is being diverted through a town known as Little Hope until it's taken care of. The bus driver shows visible concern about this, and when asked on it, he simply says that he's trying to get his passengers home quickly and safely. The policeman replies that a short detour shouldn't matter too much, and then he takes off. He drives for a while, the passengers argue about why they're taking the detour, and then the bus driver guy crashes the bus because one of the game's many jump scares got him. Nothing really to note here, but this sequence is important for later, so I have to bring it up, unfortunately. We then cut to the true opening of the game, which features a family from the 70s. We meet Ma and Pa, who are mad at each other, Megan, the creepy small child, Anthony, our protagonist, and Dennis and Tanya are also characters that vaguely exist. After a little expositionary dialogue about Pa being a drunk and how he's going to lose his job or something, we get to the real meat of the gameplay. Other than specifics, this will be the only time I mention said gameplay, because there are really only 4 different mechanics. You can walk, you can sometimes pick stuff up and turn it over, you can hit buttons and pretend you accomplished something, and last but not least, you can push a series of 2 buttons in rapid succession inside barely missable hit zones, and sometimes it'll actually have some kind of impact on something, I think. As we'll get into, though, the amount that this game holds your hand is beyond unreal. It even gives you an on-screen warning when something is about to require your input. But back to the story. A series of events transpires that, even at this point, I have a hard time rationalizing into words. We begin by seeing Dennis carrying a bunch of vinyl records to the attic. Megan comes over and bothers him for a moment before presumably shaking the ladder and making him get all pissy for a moment. Anthony turns on the stove and puts a random pot onto it without filling it up with water or anything, so I guess it already had something in it. Tanya, through a series of odd lines of dialogue, concludes that she needs to go check in on Megan because her parents were worried about her in their fight. Also, the front door here is not working from the outside. It's important, don't worry. They went out of their way to point it out. Ma goes to take a bath, and Megan jump scares her before secretly locking her in the bathroom, because I guess this family has a bathroom that locks from the outside for some reason. Megan then locks Tanya on the balcony. Why she was on the balcony is beyond me, considering the fact that she was up there looking for Megan. And this causes her to cry out for help to Anthony, even though we see in a couple minutes that there is a window that she is perfectly capable of climbing out of. Anthony comes outside and asks what's wrong, thus giving Megan, who we now see as being presumably influenced by some kind of demonic force, the time to put her doll on the stove, setting it on fire, and subsequently the house. Now, this is all happening with the game occasionally giving you choices of different dialogue options between the characters. As Anthony, you briefly speak with the father and Tanya about life and whatnot, and this is all well and good, gives us a little bit of insight of what's actually going on, but some of the options just seem to have been thrown in for the mere sake of providing the player with something to do so they don't get bored. Some of the dialogue options don't even result in different responses from the characters, which in some cases make the interaction awkward as all hell if you don't pick what the writers decided most people probably would have picked.
Can't imagine why. Growing up with such a great and supportive family.
You want to try raising a family like this? The devil himself would struggle with you guys.
It's okay, Dad. Tanya's checking on her right now.
You want to try raising a family like this? The devil himself would struggle with you guys.
Provided this is only something that you might notice if you played through the game more than once, but the problem is this game is built around being replayable. The whole point of going back and starting this again would be to try and get a different outcome, even if it's a small one. The game is riddled with these examples, and it highlights how little your input actually matters. Why are you even giving us the decision if it changes literally nothing? At least until dawn, the conversations could actually somewhat go into a different direction depending on what you said. Anyway, back to the lunacy. At this point, the narrative is being held together fundamentally with bubblegum and scotch tape, and that patch job is already starting to fall apart. How was Tanya put into a position where she could have been locked out of the house and on the balcony by Megan? Who knows? Sure is a good thing for whatever Megan's evil influencer has planned here that Tanya is an idiot who doesn't just immediately climb through the window and instead calls for Anthony to come and help her. This not only gets Anthony away from the stove or whatever place the player may have had him wandering around trying to trigger the next cutscene, allowing Megan to set fire to the house, but it also allows Anthony to survive the ensuing events, thus allowing the story to happen at all. Also, sure is a good thing that they have a bathroom that locks from the outside, and Megan being locked on the balcony coincides with her mom deciding to take a bath so she can be locked in said bathroom. And also Dennis is in the attic putting his vinyl collection away that he apparently only had out in the first place to show the audience that he had a vinyl collection so that he could easily be trapped up there, and also his dad was passed out drunk on the couch. This all happens so coincidentally perfect for everyone to be ostensibly incapacitated so they can't actually react to being burned alive. Also, I wonder who Evil Demon Guy here is. I sure can't wait for the story to explain that to me. I'm sure it'll be a completely satisfying and conclusive payoff to this very obvious setup they're making. So now we watch everything immediately fall to pieces as the linoleum kitchen flooring immediately bursts into flames. Wow, that is interesting. I didn't realize that linoleum was flammable. Oh, it's not. Well, let's give the story the benefit of the doubt. Maybe in the 70s they had a different kind of flooring that was more likely to... Oh, they didn't. Huh. Not only this, but the rest of the house appears to have been made from dry hay stems because the rest of the house is on fire and killing everyone barely 10 seconds after Anthony even realizes that it started. Ma here tries to open the door but can't because it's locked, and then proceeds to die of smoke inhalation. Apparently the whole safety rule of dropping to the floor during a fire to avoid the smoke because, smoke rises just doesn't exist in this universe. Apparently the smoke is just everywhere at all times the second the fire starts, so that's cool, I guess. Meanwhile, Dennis here chooses not to take the 7-foot drop to get out of the attic, and instead chooses to climb out of a window, thus putting himself in an even higher drop, where he then slips and impales himself on the metal fence they have outside their house. Megan here just dies, even though the game pretends to give you an option to save her, and then the dad has the roof fall on his head as he attempts to crawl to the window. Tanya, however, can't actually do anything unless Anthony tells her to. You are given the choice to either tell her to climb down from the balcony or climb through the window. If you choose the former, she will start to climb down, only to slip and get her scarf caught, where she will proceed to hang herself with what I can imagine is the strongest made scarf in existence. Alternatively, you can have her climb through the window, in which case she will do so and then die, because climbing back into the house is a terrible idea. All this does is change how her ghost looks later in the game, by the way. So, with all that done, Anthony falls to the ground in horror before a passerby finally notices and confronts him on it, before he runs into the house himself and dies, presumably. So, wow. That was an opening. What the actual hell was that? I have never seen so many contrivances crammed into such a small amount of time. This is a video game, supposedly. It's not like you're being pressed for time, unless it's your budget, in which case maybe you shouldn't have blown it all to pay for this dude. I know we're supposed to feel horrified at what's happening, and maybe this is just a testament of something being wrong with me, but after telling Tanya to climb back into the burning building that her family is dying in and watching her do so, I found myself laughing and shaking my head in some kind of weird state of amused contempt. It isn't even a choice between logic and emotion, even though the game really wants you to think it is, because the outcomes are not hinged upon your reasoning. The obviously superior plan is to climb off of the balcony, but we need this character to die for story reasons, so therefore they're going to, regardless of what you tell them to do. Really makes what this douchebag says to you throughout the entire duration of the game pretty... Oh yeah, this douchebag. Occasionally throughout the game, we're shown this smug asshole, the curator, who pops in every now and then to recap your choices and make it look like you're actually doing something and to pompously inform you on how he thinks you're doing. At no point will this asshole ever give us any information that is useful or that we didn't already have. He teases us for not knowing what the hell is going on while at the same time expecting us to figure it out, even though the story gives us absolutely no indication of what's happening until the very end. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, we're building up to a twist. I'm sure you're very excited. On 2 different occasions, he will offer to give you a hint on what's actually going on. If you choose to hear him, he will laugh in a self-righteous manner and say something completely useless that you can in no way determine anything from.
I met him once, you know? I meet everybody once. We each have our own demons. They are ours and ours alone, and they are often born out of regret.
And if you say no, he will scorn you for it and say that you're putting people's lives on the line.
No hint? Perhaps you think you can piece things together yourself. The stakes are much greater than life and death. I hope you know what you're doing.
Essentially, this guy is here to just be an asshole and make the game look deeper than it actually is. He references poets from France and quotes who he coins great storytellers, when all the while his scenes consist of him going, "Oh, do you know what's going on yet? I bet you don't. Oh dear, you missed out on getting the gun. I guess you didn't explore enough now, did you?" Occasionally, however, he will remind you that your choices absolutely do matter and the outcome of this story isn't set in stone. Surely you will be incredibly careful not to make the wrong choices, yeah? Let's take a look at the first actual big decision of the game. After cutting back to the bus crash, we're introduced to our main group of idiots finally, all of whom mysteriously look like the people who died in the fire at the beginning. We've got John, Taylor, Daniel, Andrew, and Angela. All of them are spooked because they crashed and their bus driver has mysteriously vanished. Andrew took a bump to the head, so he's not really all there. So John here gets to tell him, and coincidentally us, that he is a college professor and that they're all students on a little field trip. After some deliberation on what to do, John informs the group that the smartest thing to do is to head into the nearby town, Little Hope, and look for the bus driver. Taylor, however, says that they don't know where the bus driver went and that the smarter option is to stay put at the bus. If you are insistent enough, John will concede and leave you at the bus, which is absolutely the smarter thing to do. And then this exchange happens.
Hey, Professor! He is a professor, right? I'm still fuzzy. Can we stick together? I don't want to wait on my own.
I guess he's right. We should all stick together.
Oh, wow. So none of that actually mattered, huh? We're just gonna follow John anyway into the fog and hope, huh? Why would you... Why the hell would you give the player the option to be that insistent about staying at the bus if you were just going to force her to go with them anyway?
I'm staying here.
You can't stay.
Crawled up the professor's ass.
Again, staying at the bus is the better option, but of course Taylor doesn't actually explain why that is. She doesn't bring up that there is literally a police car sitting in the opposite direction because of another wreck. John's reasoning is that no one has been down this road since they've crashed, which... So? The policeman literally said he was diverting traffic through this area. Someone is going to be coming by. And even if you don't want to stay at the scene of the accident, which is what you're supposed to do anyway, why are you immediately deciding to go into the town that we later find out that you know is abandoned? Why would you not choose to walk back to where the cop car is instead? Nobody even brings this up as a possibility. At any point. Once the group all gets back together again, they argue about what they can do for a little bit, spend what feels like 10 minutes explaining to us that the fog is making it so they can't leave, going as far as to test out the same process of walking away only to find themselves in the same spot on 3 different occasions while they yell at each other about it. Now this, I believe, is an excellent opportunity to explain the dialogue and the voice acting, as this is one of the many moments where it shines.
This is some very weird shit going on here.
I don't know what was up with the actors with this game, but the way they deliver their lines makes me believe they either recorded them separately from one another, or this is the first time they've read the script and the initial read-through meeting was recorded and used. The lines are often emotionless and flat, something that I even noticed while the characters were scared or shouting at one another. Exact same tone of voice, just with raised volume.
Anthony, where are you, goddammit?
Spare us all. First he loses his pride, then he loses his way.
What are you trying to say?
That you've lost it.
Let go of her right now!
On top of this, this is paired with a very poor facial tracking system where the characters all seem to have the exact same expression regardless of what they're saying, with the very few exceptions of Andrew and sometimes John. There are multiple moments where the camera will linger on a character's face in a strange, awkward silence before they start talking, almost like their brains haven't processed what they're supposed to say yet.
Just a suggestion, but maybe we should figure out what the fuck is going on here first.
I'm with you.
Hey, what did that thing do to her?
I think it drowned Angela. Dragged her under the water.
Fog decides where we can and can't go? Fuck that. I'm trying another way.
Don't you kids watch horror movies? You never ever split.
Also, the dialogue is bad. The dialogue is very, very bad. As in, first draft was never proofread kind of bad. In order for you to truly understand just how bad the dialogue can get in this story, I want you to look at how long John and Andrew spend talking about throwing a rock through a window.
Give me that. I'll smash the window.
No problem. I can do this.
Okay. If you're sure.
Anyone can do this.
Not anyone.
Putting a rock through a window at 10 paces? Anyone can make the shot.
If you're feeling under pressure, let someone else do it.
I'm not feeling pressure.
Just saying.
Can you stop talking?
At this point, you can either smash the window, or if you decide to wait the 10 minutes it takes for the timer to run out, you can listen to them talk about it some more.
Not as easy as it looks, huh?
You put me off.
How did I put you off?
Constant yabbering.
I think the word is jabbering.
There's an academic who's going to be getting a cracked head if they keep on yabbering.
Jabbering.
And again.
You should have left this to me.
You put me off.
Don't blame me because you struck out.
The hitter strikes out, not the pitcher.
You pitched? I didn't notice.
Because you put me off.
Why would I do that?
Because you want to be the big man who breaks the glass and saves everyone.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, they conclude that the fog isn't letting them leave, so they have to go into the town. This is also a game mechanic where the game will turn you around if you missed something it wants you to see. At this point, we get the relationship that you have the power to either destroy or nurture through very obvious dialogue choices. Daniel and Taylor discuss it in secret while they're a good 10 feet from their group, and Taylor explains how Angela is trying to figure out if they're in a relationship or not, and how she's not ready to go public with said relationship. But, who the hell cares? Keep in mind, this is something that the game thinks that we care about, even to the extent of making it so the curator brings it up at one point. First of all, I'm not saying I don't expect people to be this stupid. Every day for a very long time, I find myself losing more and more faith in the intelligence of my fellow man. But how old are you people? You're in college, and you don't want your fellow college students to find out that you have a significant other. Why? What motivation could you possibly have to even give a modicum of a rat's ass about that? How do you think that's making your significant other feel? But I must be fair. Your hair dye choice seems to imply you wouldn't worry yourself with such trivial matters. How is this situation affecting me? We're supposed to like these people, by the way. So our little group of prodigies make their way to a bar where they meet a strange man sitting alone at the bar drinking. He introduces himself as Vince, and they proceed to get nothing done. Vince acts all weird to inform us that something is up, and Daniel and John play darts. Now, here's the thing. There's actually a lot to talk about regarding this scene, but I'm not going to do it just yet. Just keep it in mind for now. My true rage has not even reached its final form. Oh yeah, and John has the option of taking a drink or not taking a drink. The game acts like it changes something. It doesn't. Moving on. Our group proceeds ever onward, and at this point we're introduced to one of the main complaints I have about this story. To properly explain, let me derail the conversation for just a brief moment. Some of the older horror flicks out there, such as Alien and The Exorcist, depended on one very important thing that the filmmakers integrated with the story with the intention of hopefully keeping their audience scared. It's a simple thing, really, but seems to have been a skill that has stubbornly eluded filmmakers and game developers for a very long time. It's called tension building. In Alien, we have an entire scene dedicated to the characters watching a tracking device while another character is in the air vent. They warn him that the xenomorph is moving directly towards him, yet he doesn't see it anywhere around him. As the voices in his headset become more panicked as the tracker shows it getting ever closer to him, Dallas starts moving away, only to turn his light directly into the xenomorph's face. It's a jump scare, yes, but it's structured in a way that appears natural to the viewer. There's no silence to forewarn it, and the character reacts very normally to what's going on around him, spraying his flamethrower into the darkness to see and hopefully fend off what his friends are telling him is coming towards him. The audio in this scene remains completely normal up to the xenomorph's appearance when it takes Dallas off guard in his retreat. In the end, we're just watching a dot moving towards another dot. It's a brilliantly done scare, and one of the many reasons why you should watch Alien. Alternatively, the filmmakers for Alien could have just done this.
Not a clue.
I don't want to just say that jump scares are bad, because they aren't. You can do a jump scare well, as I just detailed. However, simply having a ghost grab the character's hand and scream into the camera while its face proceeds to take up the entire screen after about a frame and a half have gone by, I'll dare to say that that is an absolutely god-awful thing to build your horror game around. It's like this game was built with the intent of attracting the attention of clickbait YouTubers whose channels are based around them having aneurysms every time someone coughs too loudly. Because here's the thing, these jump scares aren't completely non-functional to the story. They're scene transitions. As I'm about to go into, the group regularly time travels, and the jump scares are what happens right before the time travel happens. Let that sink in for a moment. They put jump scares in as scene transitions. That's almost as bold of a move as fear flashes. What a horrible, cheap, and lazy way of putting an artificial scare into your story because you either can't or can't be bothered to actually try and make it scary. Congratulations, Supermassive Games. You caused an involuntary jerk for about half a second. I could do that, and I am a massive editing noob.
For a long time.
Also, clearly the developers haven't been accustomed to people getting used to things, because this is startling a whole one time. The second time was nothing but a bout of irritation that you were bold enough to do it again, and the third was a form of acceptance, much like reaching the final stage of grief when I realized that you were going to keep doing it. So buckle in, everyone, because now we're getting some more setup. Andrew and Angela are teleported back to the time of the witch trials where they meet Mary. Mary looks like Megan. Also, she appears to be very indifferent to the fact that the two very differently dressed people suddenly appeared in front of her, seeming to imply that she purposely summoned the two of them there as she asks for their names and if they'll play with her. This is a very interesting setup. I sure can't wait to see what it all means.
Hi, I'm Mike Tyson, and I'm here to talk to you about my new animated cartoon on Adult Swim, Mike Tyson Mysteries.
So after a brief introduction to Mary, the two are teleported back, and after discussing it with their colleagues, ultimately dismiss it and carry on. And when I say they carry on, I also want you to understand that you truly feel that they are carrying on in this game. There is not a single step that we miss out on, as a good half hour's worth of the gameplay is walking forward on the big obvious pathway towards the next jump scare. And the thing is that wouldn't have even been as bad had it not been for the fact that the characters move at the pace of a drunken three-legged turtle. What you are watching currently is with me holding down the button that makes them walk faster, and it is barely an improvement from the other speed. And that wouldn't have even been as bad if we had a lot to look at. But most of the time you don't. You are moving ever onward, oftentimes just trying to get the cutscene to trigger in a barren map that occasionally has a sign you can look at. All the while, the limited scenery you do have is covered in fog, giving you a nice exciting white background to look at as you move forward. They don't even fill the empty air with their terrible dialogue half the time. They simply have you walking in silence, and most of the time, if one of the NPCs wants to say something to you, they will full on stop, making you have to stop as well if you want the extra story. They couldn't have even had their moron characters walk and talk at the same time. It is impressive as all hell. We are even treated to being forced to walk through the exact same witch trials museum twice in a row, with two different pairs of characters. I am not even being hyperbolic when I say immediately after Andrew and John get through it, we cut to Daniel and Taylor walking through the exact same building, looking at the exact same clue prompts, coming out at the other end with minimal story effect. It is pure hell. But after about 15 hours of walking, our heroes reach a bridge that allegedly leads into Little Hope. Mary is here as well, and she's kind of just standing there staring at them and being all spooky. After timidly discussing what they're going to do about a kid standing on a bridge, you are given the choice on whether Angela will go with John to investigate Mary or not. If you go with him, you'll get to take part in the next jump scare time travel segment, wherein we meet Witch Trial Angela variant. If you don't, you get the funnier scene where John just disappears and everyone just kind of stands around looking about as interested in their professor's disappearance as they would if he had just mildly tripped over something.
You think the professor will be okay?
Yep. Your concern for your professor's safety is beyond touching, Andrew. The thing is I wouldn't even say this is a bad thing in a narrative-driven game like this. I like the idea that if you make the wrong decision at one point, you could miss out on some information that would potentially be important later, possibly providing the player with context to help you make a more important choice in the game's climax. Unfortunately, that is not what this game accomplished. John is still perfectly capable of informing everyone of what he saw upon his return, and he does exactly that, meaning all we missed out on was an alternate cutscene. The information we receive here isn't even that important, other than to drive home the point that the characters in the past look like the characters in the present, and it's all mysterious and such.
Mike Tyson Mysteries.
In the end, it just seems like we missed a collectible before moving on to the next area. Annoying, but completely irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. So Taylor decides that she doesn't want to go down the bridge, so instead of coming up with an alternative route or even giving the player the choice on what to do, the group decides to just split up.
That is a good idea!
John, Andrew, and possibly Angela, depending on how the players make her talk, are the only ones who barely try to oppose this idea before they head off in their own directions. In my playthroughs, Angela is constantly going with Taylor and Daniel because I forgot to have her go with Andrew and John at any point. So I'm terribly sorry if I miss out on any important plot points that come up as a result of her being with them. I'm sure they're extraordinary. The rest of the game progresses pretty similarly to this. To avoid repetition, as most of the story beats are pretty mundane, I'll give you some rapid-fire points here. The group moves deeper into Little Hope, all the while chasing after Mary's apparition, picking up clues and finding strange effigies and symbols littered around the town. Sure can't wait to find out what those mean. The highlight of the actual gameplay is moving boards and wiping dust off pictures. There is one part where you can sneak into a cabin and find a gun that screws you over more than it actually helps. But if you miss the QTE, a cat will jump scare you and Andrew will just decide to not, and then this asswipe makes fun of you for it.
Some kind of weapon might be useful about now. Don't you think? You really should have explored more thoroughly, you know. Too late now.
Other moments of idiocy and eye-rolling dialogue take place, such as this 15-minute discussion between Daniel and Taylor about how a bridge might collapse when they cross it.
Oh, shit.
You're going first, right?
You weigh half what I do. Better if you lead.
I'm not crossing this crapped-out bridge. No way.
To find the others, we gotta cross. We got no choice.
Fine. I'm heading across. You can follow me. If the bridge is still standing.
Okay, then.
The bridge doesn't collapse when you cross it, by the way. That whole exchange was basically useless. There are parts where characters almost fall into holes, saying it's too dark, even though there are bright as hell light fixtures above them as they're talking about it.
Can't see for shit. Can't see for shit. Can't see for shit. Can't see for shit. Can't see for shit.
Can't see for shit. Can't see for shit. Can't see for shit.
Characters will split up only to almost immediately reunite. You can miss a QTE and break Taylor's phone, thus depriving you of a flashlight in one of the buildings, but then we see Taylor using it as a flashlight later anyway. There's also a point where you have to push a crate over because Daniel thinks that will accomplish something for some reason. However, if you don't mash the buttons to do it, the crate will vanish in between shots and a giant hole in the ground will appear that Daniel will then fall into.
God damn this thing!
Whoa!
You can also accidentally shoot Angela here because the silhouette of a log behind her will move for no reason, defying the laws of physics in order to make you think that it's Daniel's ghost. Also, these idiots think that shooting a ghost will do something. Oh look, it did. Why not? Vince is also wandering around too. That's important to note. Characters keep hiding from him and fake out scare scenes, and if you fail hiding, he won't do anything. At one point, if you have the gun, you can almost shoot him and make him mad at you, or you can just tell him to go away and he'll still get equally mad at you. This affects the ending of the game, so I'll obviously be returning to it when we have more context. I'm sure you're incredibly excited. If he's mad at you, he'll come back at one point and say, "They're coming," in an ominous tone, and say that,
"I'll make sure they'll find you."
If he's not mad at you, the scene is considerably more awkward as he just yells, "Hey," and stares at you. Then John says that guy's a menace, even though he hasn't done anything, and then you completely ignore him and move on. It's very weird, and it makes it fairly clear what timeline the writers were intending as you move throughout this story. Through the investigations of the town, we'll occasionally get our time travel jump scare so we can get an update on the witch trials subplot. Since I've covered most of the events in the present day Little Hope, I suppose now would be a good time to talk about that for a bit. Whenever the time travel jump scare happens, thankfully the ghosts wait for everyone to grab onto each other before actually teleporting, we're shown the story of Reverend Carter and Mary, two very clearly evil people that the game wants wants us to choose between. From our very introduction, Carter is shown threatening Mary and telling her not to tell anyone of their secret. He goes on to accuse her of witchcraft, and Mary counter-accuses Witch Trial Angela. Carter apparently just takes this as truth and arrests Witch Trial Angela before trying and finding her guilty. This guilty sentence is arrived at because Mary faked a seizure and then stopped when Witch Trial Angela touched her. Then she's wrapped up in chains and thrown into the lake. Our heroes have the option to interfere, or at the very least attempt interference during these flashbacks. They have the ability to interact with physical objects, at least to a limited extent, and there are points where you can attempt to save the lives of your doubles. Not like it matters, because they all die regardless of what you do, but, you know. During their time there, it's fairly unclear on who can actually see them and who can't. Mary seems to be the only one who consistently does, and the witch trial doubles seem to trade off on whether they can or not. However, in some instances, Carter and or the judge can hear them if they're shouting. It's also important to note that there are times where the witch trial doubles can sometimes even be the ones that summon our characters to the past, deepening the mystery. The trials go on with Carter and Mary basically accusing and murdering everyone in their town, and by everyone I mean the people that look like our main characters. Oh, dear Lord, what the hell is that? Why does that man have no face? Why would they bring attention to that? Is that story related? Look at this. Holy crap, none of these people have faces. Just to fill you in on the spoilers, we never get any context for this. All these people just don't have faces. I don't know if this is related to the time travel flashback nonsense being imperfect, or if the developers just got lazy and didn't texture their background characters. Given my experience with the game so far, I'd be inclined to believe the latter, but why would you use a shot to bring it to the forefront? Ugh. Regardless, after watching this for a bit, John decides to jump the shark and say he's found a pattern.
Now we know the pattern. Angela was killed after seeing her double executed. Taylor had a narrow escape from that thing. You see your double get it? And you're next.
Yeah, that's not a pattern, my man. That's two very different events transpiring. Also, good job. You have to spell that out because you don't have enough faith in your audience to get it themselves. However, given the critical reception I've seen of this game, I suppose that's fair. Which brings me to my next interesting point. You caught how John said that Taylor had a close call, right? For context, immediately after seeing her double killed, Taylor is confronted with her double's ghost. You have the option to either run or hide from the entity when it shows up. The hiding option is just more of the heartbeat button pushes, but the part I want to show you is the running option. As you would expect, when you choose it, you are presented with a series of QTEs to see if you can effectively run away. This is obviously a life or death situation, so theoretically the tension would be incredibly high, even given the game's second-long warnings for each QTE. Surely missing even one would potentially mean that you've lost one of the lives you're trying to keep, right? Watch this.
Move! Run!
I need to get out of here!
Keep moving, go!
Let that sink in for a moment. I know I certainly needed it to. I want you to understand that I didn't touch any of the controls for that entire time. I simply watched the cinematic unfold. This game does not even require any input during this section. Remember in Until Dawn, where if you missed basically a single button, A Wendigo immediately tore you apart? Even in the sections where plot armor was a thing and you can't die, i.e. Mike in the asylum at the end, messing a QTE up still usually had consequences because the cute puppy would die. I'm not trying to say that Until Dawn didn't have useless QTEs, but I would be hard-pressed to find a single scene in that game where I could just purposefully miss every single prompt and still get the characters out unscathed. I really have no idea why they didn't make this a death possibility for Taylor. They certainly had no problem handing the mortality card to Angela the first time she saw her ghost, but for some reason they wanted to have a scary scene with Taylor without actually committing to making it consequential. It's not like her presence is required at all up to her first death possibility after that, which by the way is this. This is the first choice and get Taylor killed. Good luck figuring that out, idiot. Get ready for the curator to make a stupid comment about how you could have avoided a death, but I digress. At this point, and trust me, we're close to the end, there are a couple more important events I need to bring up before I get to the big twist. As John and Andrew are wandering around the Witch Trials Museum, you'll come across a glass case containing Mary's poppet. The ensuing conversation between the two immediately goes straight into Looney Tunes world as John buys a pair of spelunky spring shoes for the conclusions he jumps to. He tells Andrew that the ghosts can attach themselves to physical objects and therefore burning the doll will get rid of Mary. Holy crap, John, do you have any idea all the layers of stupidity that idea has? Assuming this is true, which is a jump in and of itself, you have absolutely no way of knowing if this would be the object that her ghost is attached to, and what's more, you have no way of knowing if burning the doll would get rid of her spirit or just let her out Wendigo style. Remember when Buffy the Vampire Slayer tried that in The Grudge? That sure did go well. And by the fact that Andrew is pointing it out in the first place, this whole idea is based on movie logic. Regardless, you have the choice to burn the doll or not burn the doll here. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I can just tell you right now it doesn't matter what you pick. Whether you burned it or not, the doll will be gone when Daniel and Taylor make their way through the building and nothing changes narratively. However, I do love how John sets it on fire and immediately drops it on the wooden floor, setting a flame to literally nothing else. I guess wood and fabric aren't flammable substances like linoleum is. After all this nonsense, we finally start moving into the story's climax. We are given a flashback where you meet Andrew's witch trial double, and you are given the choice of whether to tell him to accuse Mary or Carter of being evil. It's very interesting because Mary has been nothing but an evil little brat this entire game, and the characters have done nothing but push how evil she is. Yes, Carter's an asshole too. Our first scene with him shows him threatening Mary and saying her not to speak of his quote-unquote secret. The thing is, after seeing that, the assumption is not that Mary, the little piece of crap that evilly smiles at the torture and death of her elders, is now innocent. It makes me think that they're both evil and possibly working together to some extent. However, the game doesn't even provide that as an option. You simply have to decide who you don't like more. If you do the in-character thing of telling the Andrew double to accuse Mary, Andrew will say he has a feeling that he did the wrong thing. Then, surprise, surprise, in the end you did the wrong thing. However, if you accuse Carter of being evil, the thing that Andrew hasn't even entertained as a possibility this entire story and has absolutely no reason to think may be the case since the whole point of everything has been to stop Mary, then the rest of the characters rightfully say to you, "What the hell are you doing?" And Andrew just shrugs it off with, "No, I don't know, she's just a kid." But in the end though, oh man, you made the right choice. Sure is a good thing that Andrew just had that random feeling out of nowhere. I know there's a copy of Carter's Evil Death Bible that you can pick up somewhere, and I think I probably missed it, which sure, that makes it a little bit more justifiable if so, but you absolutely should not have the option to accuse Carter if you didn't pick that clue up. It's so weirdly out of nowhere, and I feel like an alien because it seems to me that any player operating on a thought process of logic would accuse Mary of being evil long before they would Carter. Yes, I know Carter is obviously a villain through this whole thing. Most of his screen time is spent murdering people, but there's enough of a lack of evidence in his favor. If nothing else, the flashbacks just make it look like Mary is manipulating Carter to achieve her own means. This is especially apparent in the bell tower scene where Daniel tries to save his double and Carter stares at it in shock for a moment before confirming to Mary that he's doing the right thing.
Look, child, see who you would have me spare. See, he is no longer of this earth.
If we're operating from the idea that Mary is the one bringing our characters here, it would stand to reason that she knows they would eventually try to save some lives, which would in turn make the accused look more guilty. I say this, although in my initial playthrough I did pick the Carter option, as I thought it was not an exclusive one to him, but a they're both evil, accuse them both kind of deal. So in the end, I picked the better option based on a misunderstanding of the choice I was being given. Anecdotal, sure, but still. Make your irrelevant story choices more clear, please. Back in the present, depending on who you've gotten out alive at this point, there will be a big battle between our characters and their ghostly doubles, providing some additional death possibilities. At least one character, I believe at the very least, will survive no matter what and accompany you into the final house. This is so they can possibly insta-die from the ceiling collapsing at the very end, depending on a dialogue choice you made earlier. I'm not kidding with that, by the way. There are two different occasions that I'm aware of, at least, where Daniel and Taylor specifically are being attacked by their ghosts. Another character will be trying to save them, and as they are being attacked and mauled by their respective ghosts, you have the option to either say, "Go save yourself," or "Oh God, please help me." If you ask for help, you've doomed yourself to death. This is a thing that happens. You will escape from that encounter, but you will then die from a random ceiling collapse at the end of the game, regardless of anything else you do. Great job, guys. I really feel like I have to think critically and logically to get everyone out. Maybe I'm just a terrible, horrible individual, but personally I don't really see the issue in asking for help, especially considering it's been incredibly obvious up to this point that the ghosts are only going after one person in particular. I don't see the harm in requesting assistance from someone they're going to ignore. What's more, in a realistic situation, I really don't feel that someone who is in a life and death situation similar to this one would really be thinking to say to the person helping them to go and save themselves. I feel they probably wouldn't say anything, you know, because they're trying to fight for their lives. And making the conscious decision to speak to someone during a situation like this would probably take a little bit of their concentration away from the whole trying not to die thing. No, I'm not saying that no person would absolutely ever speak during a fight for their lives, but I'm saying that more than likely they wouldn't really have the thought process to do so in that moment. The evolutionary will of survival and adrenaline are pretty strong things, dear viewer. They kind of override a lot of other things. And there we have that. That's the story. At this point, you may think I'm done. You may think I've covered most of the important points, and if you haven't suffered through this game as I have, you might even think that in the end, it doesn't actually sound all that bad.
But wait! There's more!
Perhaps you even think that I've over-exaggerated some of the issues, and maybe you could even say that, well, yeah, but even though the game's bad, it sounds like it might be kind of fun to try and get everyone out alive at least once. Perhaps it's worth grabbing on a particularly good sale. Perhaps you still think that this isn't quite literally the worst narrative choices matter game to ever come out, rivaling that of even the deathly cringe fest that is Life is Strange. Allow me to change your mind with 4 words. None of it happened. There are different variations of this ending, obviously, but I'm going to detail for you the one I first received. The morning comes, and Andrew is sitting at the steps of the final house, a somber look on his face. He is approached by Vince, who is sympathetic towards him and offers him some words of comfort. We then receive the realization that Andrew is the bus driver from the beginning of the game. Not only this, but he is Anthony from the game's opening house fire scene. And Vince, the mysterious man wandering Little Hope, was Tanya's boyfriend. We receive multiple flashbacks to inform us that everything that has happened in this game that was not an interaction with Vince were simply the hallucinations of a madman. John, Taylor, Angela, Daniel, the ghosts, the witch trials, and the implications and setups we receive building up to something that was happening, something that was haunting the characters we were forced to get to know throughout the duration of this game, something that the curator was ordering us to solve, something that we made a goal to emerge victorious from, even if it took multiple playthroughs. None of it was real. Nothing we did mattered. Vince walks away and leaves Anthony alone and miserable, and we fade to credits. The film Fight Club is one I feel is worth bringing up in this instance. If you haven't seen it, I'm spoiling it for you. It's been out for 20 years. You've had your chance to watch it. When we receive the twist that Tyler Durden is simply a figment of the narrator's imagination, the the story is not affected negatively in any way. This is because the story was not hinged on that twist. The twist wasn't the point of the film. It was the implications of it. What's more, if you had really honed in and paid attention to the things people said and the way some of the interactions went down, you could probably pretty easily determine what the twist was to begin with. For example, Marla spoke to the narrator the same way that she spoke with Tyler, and most of the conversations that were about Tyler were usually quite minimal, or Marla would react a little strangely to something the narrator said about him. In the end, the realization that Tyler and the narrator were one and the same provided a new and fascinating perspective on all the things that were accomplished in Tyler's name. The twist enriched the story because it was masterfully woven into the narrative, and when we finally got it, everything still made sense and everything still had meaning. If not more so, seeing as Fight Club had become a nationwide phenomenon at this point. Now, allow me to rapid fire everything that I can recall that was set up in Little Hope and subsequently destroyed with what is fundamentally the same twist. Our group of characters look like the people who died in a fire at the beginning of the game, also like the people who were accused and subsequently killed as witches during the witch trials, hinting at some kind of reincarnation system, which is even joked about by Daniel at one point.
You a burglar in your spare time?
No, but I was in a past life.
The witch trials in general. The priest during the witch trials and whether or not he's evil. Mary during the witch trials and whether or not she's evil. The fact that our main characters have the ability to invisibly influence the events of the past and whether or not Mary was the one who summoned them to this time for some unknown reason. Mysterious bruises and injuries appearing on Taylor's body throughout the game depending on whether you made her go back into the house. The poppet that Mary has and its implied significance. Mysterious symbols and clues littered throughout the game. The supposed secret between the priest and Mary. The goddamn dark demonic figure influencing Megan to burn the house down at the beginning of the game. None of it mattered. None of it was real. This little Blair Witch effigy here means nothing. Probably wasn't there. This statue that supposedly looks like Taylor of her witch trial double. Nah, it wasn't there either. That person never existed. Taylor's childhood tire swing and how it had gotten to Little Hope doesn't matter. Taylor's not a real person. The literal goddamn demon that convinced Megan to burn down the house at the beginning of the game. I genuinely have no idea, because that presumably did happen. We are under the impression that Little Hope is an abandoned town. If so, why is Vince here? If not, why is Anthony able to wander throughout said town without running into anyone else as he went through both business and residential areas? For that matter, why in the absolute hell did Vince play along with his delusion? Our first interaction with him has him introducing himself to us. Why would he introduce himself if him and Anthony already knew each other? Don't tell me they never spoke, because guess what? Anthony has a line of dialogue that informs us that he has.
He came in last week. We shot the breeze a little bit. I like him.
Why are you talking to this man like this is the first time you've met when it clearly isn't? What are you doing? So you mean to tell me that this asshole, for absolutely no discernible reason whatsoever, decided he was going to play along with this obviously mentally disturbed man who was walking around talking to himself and running away from invisible monsters? Not until, or choice dependent if, it gets to the point where he almost shoots you, do you decide that maybe you should call somebody about it. And it isn't even from a place of compassion and making sure that this guy who's clearly a danger to himself and everyone around him doesn't hurt himself or everyone around him. It comes from you being pissed at him because he survived and your girlfriend didn't. Provided he didn't shoot at you or hurt your feelings when he told you to go away at the church, you wait until morning to come up to him and say it isn't his fault and that there's a diner with a working phone that he can use. Well, gee golly gosh, Vince, thanks for that. It's not like you couldn't have given us that information when we asked for it at the beginning of the game.
There's a phone, but it's been dead for years. Maybe there's still one working in town.
I would say that you're just a bad person who let a delusional man wander around an abandoned town by himself all night. But I legitimately don't understand your actions because they don't make any sense whatsoever. Then we come to Anthony. This moron was somehow able to drive a bus up to a traffic accident where the cop diverting him to Little Hope came up and said and did nothing about the fact that he was driving an empty bus talking about wanting to get people home. You mean to tell me that this guy didn't think to say something about that? or tell someone about that, or take any action whatsoever that an old man driving a bus basically just admitted to you that he was hallucinating and thus probably shouldn't be operating a vehicle of any sort. Oh well, what's the worst could happen for... Oh yeah. What the hell was the relevance of the witch trials? There was so much set up with that. So many characters, so much mystery and intrigue. Even if it was done horribly, it was still there. How is it even related to anything else that was going on in Anthony's head at that time? Well, you see, dear viewer, Anthony had a few books on witch trials sitting in random spots in his house before it burned down. That's the relevance. Also, you remember Daniel and Taylor? Remember how they're secretly in a relationship? You realize the implication of this is that Anthony took his delusion so incredibly far that he invented a romance in his head between these two people who don't exist, and facilitated it through the imaginary discussions they had on it, even going through the trouble of having his other imaginary friend be suspicious about it. Also, their real-life counterparts are step-siblings, so that's weird. And holy dear lordy, what a massive, massive coincidence that the traffic accident happened just as Anthony was driving by, which in turn put him through his abandoned hometown where his dead sister's boyfriend also just happened to be at the exact same time, who in turn decided to play along with his delusion so that he could play out the scenario that the game needed for its story. What a lucky turn of events. How can you come up with a concept for a mystery and then throw all these seeds and hints throughout your story only to throw literally all of it away and say none of it mattered? Do you think that maybe that is literally the biggest middle finger that you can give to your audience and any kind of investment they may have had in your story? And then I find out that, oh wait, this isn't the first time you people have done this. You pulled the exact same twist in Man of Medan. You actually had the nerve to reuse the same "it was all a dream" twist a second time in a row. Like, man, what the hell happened? Until Dawn wasn't great, but at least the events that took place in it actually happened. At least the characters we were trying to save actually existed. What possible reason would someone have to want to play this a second time, knowing that nothing they do matters because everything is a hallucination and none of the people are real? A game that is fundamentally built around being replayable, destroyed in the final 2 minutes of the game. Unless you're me, of course, who plays through it 3 times because he's a masochist. But do you know what the worst part of all this is? The actual real-world worst part of this entire game and everything associated with it. As of the writing of this script, the game has a 76% overall positive rating on Steam. People are eating this up and treating it as gold. And I have seen people praising it for the choices affecting the story and for it being scary. I see people making full-on incorrect statements about the game, and in some cases even missing the point of what the twist was trying to get across. And though most of the people I see are in agreement that the ending is atrocious, some will say that the rest of the game makes up for it. Take a trip to the Steam reviews sometime and take a look. This is not an isolated coincidence. This is a growing problem. It is a problem that has infected our storytelling like a cancer, and it's been growing more and more apparent in the recent years. Because the thing is, the fact that Little Hope is an atrocious story isn't the actual problem. It's simply a symptom of a much larger issue. Perhaps larger than a lot of people realize. The willingness to accept a story that is bad, and even go as far to praise it for being incredible, blindly defending it even to the point of demonizing anyone who would dare criticize it, seeming to be unaware that the more we accept and the lower we set our standards, the worse these products are going to get. And this is what has been happening for a very long time now. Gone are the days of Terminator 2, Jurassic Park, Aliens, Fight Club, Soma, The Thing, BioShock, and The Last of Us, and paved the way for Terminator Dark Fate, Fallen Kingdom, Alien Covenant, The Last of Us 2, and the Dark Pictures' Little Hope. All stemming from writers realizing that they don't have to try anymore because a large portion of their audience have taken hold of the idea that there is no such thing as a bad story. And so, the decline in quality oozes into our media in the form of plot holes, forced situations, and payoffs facilitated through contrivances and logical fallacies, characters with the depth of puddles and personalities of wet planks, and stories that are, for one reason or another, just overall underwhelming disappointments. Because why should the writers try to make something good if the check gets deposited regardless? And all these criticisms are waved away, while the labels of nitpickers and contrarians, among others, are given to those who present them. All the while, we watch stories we once loved disrespected and trampled on, while original concepts are silenced among the screams of mediocrity. The point of our storytelling medium is, and always has been, about taking us away to faraway places and to allow us to experience things that we would otherwise be incapable of experiencing. From historical events to alien worlds untouched by man, to challenge our ideas and make us think. They can make us cry, they can make us laugh. They can take us to the most terrifying places on Earth and throw us in the shoes of a hero trying to survive horrifying threats. They safely put us in situations we would never want to be in worlds we fantasize over or would dread to be a part of. We can be thrown into the darkest mines and have the morality of man tested to its limits, or into dark waters far in the future where the very definition of human is called into question. We can have superheroes, we can have monsters, we can have dragons and knights and mixtures of any such genre or concept you can think of, depicting love, sorrow, joy, excitement, terror, and any such emotion that can be conveyed. They're reflections of us as people. They're the ultimate way to express yourself. And I don't want to lose that, even as I watch the majority of the population so willing to. This game represents what is now considered above average. This is the state of our media now. And if we aren't careful, we're going to lose that which makes the storytelling medium the very special and unique thing that it is. I can only assume, as per the positive feedback Little Hope has received, that supermassive games will do nothing to change their formula. And in fact, I wouldn't doubt that they will double down and pull this nonsense twist a third time in a row. And it will sell. And it will be praised. And the cycle continues on an ever downward spiral. And I will be here, shouting to the sky, pointing it out to anyone who will listen.